In early 2019, over 100 million people downloaded an app that promised to teach them about their country. What if your child's homework app was watching everything you did? In February 2019, the Chinese government launched an educational mobile application called Xueshi Changhua, which translates as Study the Great Nation or Study Xi, Strong Nation. The app featured quizzes, videos, news articles about Chinese history and politics, and a point system that rewarded users for engaging with content about President Xi Jinping's ideology. Within months, it became the most downloaded app in China's Apple Store, with government figures claiming over 100 million registered users. This wasn't a voluntary phenomenon. Communist Party members, government employees, state media journalists, and eventually elementary and middle school children were pressured or required to download it. What officials presented as a patriotic learning tool allegedly contained something far more invasive hidden in its code. This is the story of how an app marketed as education became what cybersecurity experts called a surveillance device in millions of people's pockets. The app appeared suddenly across China in early 2019. Developed by technology giant Alibaba for the Communist Party's propaganda department, it featured a red and gold interface dominated by images of President Xi Jinping. Users could watch videos about Xi's international visits, read party news articles, and answer questions about economic policies and Chinese history. The gamification was immediate and deliberate. Users earned study points for watching patriotic videos, reading articles, sharing content, and passing quizzes correctly. Schools began tracking which students had the highest scores. Government offices in Hunan province issued notices describing app promotion as a mandatory, ideological task for party cadres nationwide. By April 2019, registered users reached the 100 million mark according to state media reports. The Huawei App Store alone reported 300 million downloads. This explosive growth wasn't organic. All 90 million Communist Party members received orders to download it. State-owned enterprise employees found it waiting on their work phones. Teachers told students it was required. Parents of elementary school children discovered their kids needed the app for homework assignments linked to China's Young Pioneers Youth Organization. One Guangdong television journalist named Lu Qijuan later described placing her phone on her son's desk with the camera pointing at him while he did homework. A voice from the app monitored his posture, reminded him to sit up, and urged him to work faster when his pace slowed. The Ministry of Education and the Young Pioneers Association launched a companion website and app specifically for elementary and middle school-aged children. According to state-run Global Times, this version was designed to help children learn about new socialist thought and Chinese classics as part of a campaign to consolidate their belief in the party and inspire them to be reliable socialist successors. Lessons included modules titled, I Am Chinese, introducing children to China's 56 ethnic groups living in harmony, and building a well-off society. The interface used bright colors, animated characters, and reward systems familiar to children's educational games. Teachers were required to dedicate one class per week to Young Pioneers activities, with core training materials based on Xi Jinping thought. In August 2019, the Open Technology Fund, a U.S. government-funded initiative, partnered with Cure 53, a Berlin-based cybersecurity firm, to audit the Android version of Study the Great Nation. The research team spent 15 days analyzing the app's code and behavior. What they discovered went far beyond normal app permissions. The audit uncovered code that Cure 53 described as resembling a backdoor which is able to run arbitrary commands with superuser privileges. On October 11th, Cure 53 released its findings publicly. The report concluded that the app contained functionality that amounted to a backdoor to rooted devices, essentially granting complete administrator-level access to a user's phone. Sarah Aoun, Director of Technology at the Open Technology Fund, explained to ABC News, "It's spying on users in the sense that it's collecting a lot of information on users that it wouldn't normally need. There's no good reason that this app should be collecting all this information and sending it back to the servers. The app could access significantly more than quizzes and videos required. It scanned to identify other apps running on users' devices, including travel apps and messaging platforms. It collected location data continuously. It sent detailed app log reports containing user data and activity on a daily basis to servers, including those owned by Alibaba. The backdoor code potentially granted what Cure 53 called superuser access, essentially giving someone the power to do anything on a device. This included downloading additional software, modifying files and data, or installing keyloggers to intercept passwords and account numbers from keystrokes. The report found that on rooted Android devices, which account for roughly 80% of China's smartphone market, the app could theoretically access messages, photos, contacts, browsing history, and even activate cameras and microphones. While the audit team emphasized they could not verify whether or how this backdoor access had been used in practice, the technical capability existed in the code. Perhaps most concerning to researchers was the intentionally weakened security. The app used weak encryption algorithms, specifically DES or data encryption standard, for handling information linked to users' biometric data and emails. Modern DES encryption can be broken through brute force attack in less than a week. More secure algorithms like AS and 3DS were employed in other parts of the same app, raising questions about why certain security features were deliberately undermined. China State Council Information Office responded to the Washington Post with a fact statement. We learned from those who run the Study the Great Nation app that there's no such thing as you have mentioned. Alibaba's DingTalk spokesperson stated, DingTalk is an open technology platform, and its suite of technology tools can be used for independent development of other applications and does not have any backdoor code or scanning issues. Security experts noted these denials did not address the specific technical findings documented in the Cure 53 report. The weak encryption and superuser permissions remained unexplained. The Study the Great Nation controversy emerged amid China's massive expansion of digital surveillance infrastructure. As of 2019, China's Skynet system comprised approximately 200 million surveillance cameras nationwide. The government had deployed facial recognition systems in public spaces, required real name registration for internet access, and implemented social credit systems tracking citizen behavior. Other surveillance tools came to light during this period. Security researchers discovered the PhoneKai app, which border guards in Xinjiang installed on travelers' phones to download and scan contacts, messages, and call logs. The Jingwang app imposed on Uyghurs collected similar personal data while searching for content officials deemed undesirable. The primary evidence comes from Cure 53's peer-reviewed technical analysis conducted in calendar weeks 34 and 35 of August 2019. The 15-day project involved multiple team members and an external contractor who analyzed the app's source code, network traffic, and permission structure. The report documented 6 critical findings related to potential human rights violations, using the European Convention on Human Rights as a baseline. Each finding included technical proof from source code examination and observed app activity. The report rated several issues as proven, based on clear code evidence showing HR violation potential. Researchers documented that data collected by the app, including users' locations, lists of other installed apps, and activity logs, was transmitted to multiple entities. The primary destination was shui11.cn, a domain owned by Alibaba. Additional servers receiving data were linked to Alibaba cloud infrastructure. The app's code contained references linking the backdoor functionality to Alibaba or Alibaba Cloud, though researchers acknowledged they couldn't definitively prove Alibaba created the vulnerability versus implementing it under government directive. A March 2021 study by Citizen Lab examined TikTok's source code for comparison and found it not exceptional when compared to industry norms. In contrast, Cure 53's report on Study the Great Nation described it as having technical capabilities that go well beyond what it purports to do, and maintains a level of access that no app would normally have over a user's device. Multiple independent cybersecurity researchers reviewed the Cure 53 findings. The Open Technology Fund, which funded the research, verified the methodology and conclusions. Security experts interviewed by major news outlets including ABC News, CNBC, CNN, and The Washington Post confirmed that the technical capabilities described were unusual and concerning for an educational app. Circumstantial evidence emerged from user reports across China. Communist Party members shared on social media that supervisors checked their study point totals regularly. Teachers posted about students competing for top scores on leaderboards visible to classmates. Parents described pressure to ensure children use the app daily. Tools appeared on GitHub offering to automate app usage to accumulate points without active engagement, suggesting users felt coerced to maintain high scores for professional or social reasons. The app's mandatory adoption by specific groups provided additional context. Internal notices from party organizations in Hunan province explicitly described promoting the app as an ideological task. The connection between app test scores and journalist credential renewal demonstrated government integration of the platform into professional licensing. Alibaba and Chinese government officials maintained that no backdoor existed and that the app functioned only as advertised. The technical evidence from Cure 53 directly contradicted this position, but important questions remained unanswered. The audit could not determine whether the backdoor capabilities were ever actively used. The code provided the potential for surveillance, but researchers found no smoking gun showing actual implementation. Some technology experts noted that many commercial apps request extensive permissions and collect large amounts of user data. The line between aggressive data collection, which has become industry standard, and surveillance specifically designed for government monitoring isn't always clear from code alone. What distinguished Study the Great Nation was the combination of mandatory adoption, government control, weak encryption, and superuser access requests. Whether Alibaba knowingly created vulnerabilities or was compelled by government directive remains uncertain. Alibaba publicly denied creating backdoor code. However, Cure 53 noted that intentionally weak encryption algorithms appeared alongside strong encryption in the same app, suggesting design choices rather than oversight. Chinese law requires technology companies to cooperate with state security agencies, complicating any assignment of responsibility. Defenders of the app pointed out that location tracking, device scanning, and data collection occur in many popular applications. A January 2023 Georgia Tech study found that TikTok collected device and user data similar in categories to Facebook and other platforms. Critics countered that context matters. An entertainment app collecting data for advertising differs from a government-mandated educational app with superuser access. The Cure 53 audit examined only the Android version of the app. The iOS version's behavior remained largely unanalyzed in published reports. The research team acknowledged they couldn't verify how or whether the backdoor capabilities were deployed in practice. The gap between technical possibility and confirmed usage left room for interpretation. Some critics of the research noted that the Open Technology Fund receives U.S. government funding, suggesting potential bias. However, the technical findings from Cure 53, a respected independent European firm, stood on their own technical merits regardless of funding sources. Chinese government representatives framed the app as a normal educational tool, reflecting legitimate state interest in citizen education about governance and policy. They noted that many countries have civics education programs and that using mobile technology to deliver this education represented modernization rather than surveillance. David Bandersky, an expert on Chinese propaganda at the University of Hong Kong, provided nuanced analysis. He described the app as part of a broader evolution in how the Communist Party ensured its messaging reached citizens in the smartphone age. Once engagement with the app is enforced by administrative demands that it be installed and used, something that is already happening, the messages of the party become inescapable. He explained to CNN in February 2019. For millions of Chinese citizens, the app became an inescapable part of daily life. Communist Party members described opening the app each morning before work to accumulate study points, knowing supervisors would check their progress. Some spent hours watching propaganda videos not by choice but by obligation, understanding that low engagement might affect career advancement or social standing. Children as young as 6 found themselves monitored by app-based systems while doing homework in their own bedrooms. The journalist Lu Qijuan's experience, placing her phone to watch her son study, exemplified how surveillance technology normalized intrusion into private family spaces under the guise of educational support. Her son's posture, concentration, and pace were all subject to algorithmic observation and correction. Elementary school students competed on public leaderboards, showing which children studied party ideology most diligently. Teachers were measured on how effectively they drove student engagement with the platform. The pressure to perform created what psychologists call a chilling effect, where people modify their behavior knowing they're being watched, even in supposedly private moments. For dissidents, journalists, activists, and members of religious minorities, the app represented something darker. Taiwanese political commentator Yotarn Lee told Radio Free Asia that the world needed to recognize this as a high-tech and evolving form of totalitarianism. The app's potential to access messages, contacts, locations, and other apps meant that anyone required to install it potentially exposed their entire digital life to government monitoring. U.S.-based legal expert Tung Biao connected the app to President Xi's broader personality cult. They are now engaged in a personality cult around Xi Jinping in every corner of China, and the language that we saw during the Mao era is now being revived, he explained to Radio Free Asia in October 2019. For those who lived through China's Cultural Revolution, the parallels to Mao's Little Red Book were unmistakable. The human cost extended beyond China's borders. The revelation that over 100 million people carried an app with potential backdoor surveillance capabilities on their phones raised concerns about contacts with people outside China. Anyone who communicated with someone using the compromised app potentially exposed their own messages, calls, and personal information to collection. Think of your smartphone as your home. It contains your photos, messages, finances, work, relationships, and daily routines. Most apps are like guests you invite in for specific purposes. They might see one room or access one service. What Cure 53 found in Study the Great Nation was code that could act like a master key, potentially opening every door and drawer while you slept. The technical term superuser access, or root access, means complete control over a device's operating system. It's the digital equivalent of having administrator privileges on every function. In legitimate contexts, only the phone's owner or trusted system processes should have this level of access. Finding it in a government-mandated app represents what security experts call a fundamental violation of the principle of least privilege, where software should only access what it absolutely needs to function. This case matters beyond China's borders for 3 critical reasons. First, it demonstrates how authoritarian governments adapt surveillance to the mobile age. The old methods of informants, wiretaps, and file keeping have been replaced by code that can monitor millions simultaneously and continuously. Second, it shows how educational tools and family applications can be weaponized. The app targeted children, exploiting parents' desire to help their kids succeed academically while establishing surveillance as normal. Third, it revealed how technology companies can become complicit in state surveillance, whether willingly or under legal compulsion. The weak encryption discovery particularly troubled security experts. Strong encryption protects user data from hackers, criminals, and unauthorized access. When a developer intentionally uses weak encryption, especially for sensitive data like biometrics, it creates vulnerability. Cure 53's finding that Study the Great Nation mixed weak and strong encryption algorithms in the same app suggested deliberate design choice rather than incompetence. This pattern appears in systems built with lawful access backdoors, where governments demand the technical ability to break encryption. Legal frameworks worldwide struggle to address these issues. The Chinese national intelligence law requires citizens and organizations to support national intelligence work when requested. Technology companies operating in China face impossible choices between user privacy and legal compliance. This tension extends to international companies. When Alibaba, a global technology giant, builds apps for the Chinese government, the compromise of user security affects international business relationships and trust in Chinese technology exports. From a human rights perspective, mandatory surveillance apps violate multiple international principles. The United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 12 states, "No one shall be subjected to arbitrary interference with his privacy, family, home, or correspondence." When governments require citizens to install software that enables complete access to personal communications and locations, they transform the phone from tool to monitoring device. The impact on children raises additional ethical concerns. Developmental psychologists note that children form their understanding of privacy norms from early experiences. When schools require surveillance apps for homework, children learn that constant monitoring is normal and expected. This normalization of surveillance in childhood may create generations less likely to question or resist intrusive data collection practices as adults. What happens to privacy as a concept when an entire generation grows up under constant surveillance? Here's what we know with certainty. The Study the Great Nation app was downloaded by over 100 million people in China, many under government pressure or mandate. Security researchers documented code in the app that provided capabilities far beyond educational functions, including potential superuser access, device scanning, and intentionally weak encryption. The Chinese government denied these findings, but did not provide technical rebuttals to specific code analysis. What remains uncertain is how extensively these capabilities were deployed in practice. The existence of surveillance potential in the code doesn't definitively prove implementation. The extent of Alibaba's agency versus government compulsion in creating the app's architecture remains unclear. What comes next raises questions that affect surveillance technology worldwide, not just in China. China will likely continue developing and mandating digital platforms that combine education, propaganda, and data collection. The precedent of Study the Great Nation showed that mass adoption of government surveillance tools is achievable when framed as educational or patriotic duty. Expect similar platforms with improved security to avoid outside detection, potentially expanding to cover more age groups and professional categories. The integration of artificial intelligence and biometric tracking into these systems represents the probable next evolution. Other authoritarian governments may adopt similar models. A 2019 Open Technology Fund study documented Chinese surveillance and censorship equipment sales to at least 73 countries across 5 continents, including Brazil, Malaysia, Tanzania, Poland, and South Korea. The combination of educational framing with technical surveillance capabilities provides authoritarian governments a template for digital social control. Global technology companies might implement stronger protections against government-mandated backdoors in apps. However, Chinese law requires cooperation with state security, and companies prioritizing the Chinese market will likely continue complying with local requirements over privacy principles. The tension between government access demands and user privacy will intensify rather than resolve. Security researchers and civil society organizations will develop better tools for detecting surveillance capabilities in apps. The Cure 53 methodology demonstrated that independent technical audits can expose hidden functionalities. Increased scrutiny of government-mandated apps may create some deterrent effect, though authoritarian states have limited accountability to outside criticism. The line between education and surveillance proved thinner than many imagined. When 100 million people carry code in their pockets that could potentially watch everything they do, the question isn't just about technology. It's about power, consent, and what societies accept as normal. The Study the Great Nation app disappeared from many foreign app stores after the revelations, but within China, the pressure to use it continued. As of 2025, similar platforms still operate with millions of users. The surveillance doesn't end. It just becomes harder to detect. If you want to understand how financial systems get weaponized the same way technology platforms do, watch our investigation, Inside the Bank That Launders the World's Dirty Money next. It follows another trail where institutions built for one purpose end up serving very different masters.